Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor magazine. In this two-part series, Tony Weber and I host a conversation on the urgent need for mission-specific training for pilots and aircrews in public safety aviation. Join us as we discuss the critical gaps between factory training and the specialized skills required for various mission sets, such as aerial firefighting and hoist rescue operations. Our guests, who are all Hangar Z alumni, include SR3's Dave Callen and Rob Munday, and Riverside County Sheriff Aviation's Mike Calhoun. The conversation shares personal insights and experiences, emphasizing the importance of leveraging existing knowledge and resources to enhance training programs that ensure safety and efficiency in the field. We'll navigate the intricate world of helicopter training, covering everything from cost-effective solutions and OEM training to the challenges of securing approval for specialized instruction. As we explore the complexities of multi-mission agencies and special operations, we'll discuss the balance between utilizing autopilot systems and maintaining essential hand-flying skills, all while highlighting the significance of preparation and sound decision-making in high-pressure situations. This conversation is a call to action for professionals in the field to embrace continuous learning and collaboration. Whether you're a seasoned pilot or hoist operator or new to public safety aviation, you won't want to miss the invaluable insights shared in this episode. Thank you to our sponsors, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, Metro Aviation, and CNC Technologies.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Down by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host, Jon Gray. With us today is, some guys with a lot of experience to talk about some training. A lot of the podcasts that we talk about training as it pertains to the aircrew as a whole. This particular conversation is going to be specific to the pilot in a lot of the conversations that we're having. We will talk about the aircrew and how what we're doing on the pilot side plays into the aircrew's ability to do their job, and we'll lean into Rob Munday pretty heavily for that part of the conversation. What we want to talk about today is what Rob's termed the gap, the difference between the factory training that everybody receives when they go to their aircraft specific training at Bell or Airbus or MD or wherever you're going to get that initial training for the aircraft you're flying, as compared to the mission specific training that a lot of us hopefully are getting as it pertains to the specific mission sets that we have outside of patrol. You know, whether it's rescue training, hoist rescue training, airborne use of force training, fast rope training, aerial firefighting. There's a lot of specific missions that we're doing. So the conversation today is really to focus on the gap that we might see in training and the need for that and where to potentially get some of that training. So, I'm really thankful for the SR3 guys and Mike Calhoun and Tony joining us as a co-host. Tony Weber, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. It's always good to be back. And when I look at who we're going to be talking to tonight, this is going to be pretty awesome. This is a solid group of guys, and I have no doubt we're going to have a few laughs thrown in there. And you talk about a good subject tonight. I think we're going to go down some really good rabbit trails.
Yeah. You know, I everybody on this recording are Hangar Z vets, and it's always a good time when we're hanging out. There's always drinks flowing. So on that, let's do some quick introductions and let us know what your drink of the day is. Can't talk to you guys without doing drink of the day. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm drinking out of my Massif cup that you guys actually
look at that. Wow.
Nice. At Echo
Nice, buddy.
in Austin. So this was the cup that preceded the dog that took over the podcast recording. But I'm familiar. In my Massif cup, I'm drinking a Smog City Brewing Sabertooth Squirrel. It's an amber IPA, which is kind of unique. Coming in at 6%. It's really good. Out of Torrance, California. So that's what I'm going with. Tony, we brought you in. You're coming to us from the beer mecca of at least Southern California. What are you drinking?
So I'm going to highlight a Mike Hess Brewing, and so it's a local brewery here in San Diego. I think some of you have been to it. There's a couple of them here in San Diego. Rob's hand went up. And so one of my favorites from Mike Hess is a Solus. So that's what I'm going to be going with tonight for my craft beer.
All
Cheers,
right.
boys.
Cheers. Mike Calhoun, welcome to the podcast. You've been on the podcast as a guest, a co-host, a guest, a host, kind of all the roles. So today you're joining us as a guest. What are you drinking today?
Well, I got just like this electrolyte drink, little fit aid, and I got some water. So yeah, got to stay hydrated.
Living the
High
dream.
quality water, brother.
We're going to be hammered at the end of this, Mike.
Wow.
I know.
We've got to have one water expert representing
Yeah.
the podcast, and tonight that's you. Thank you for representing. Jeff Rakovich will be proud.
Yeah. Thanks for being responsible.
That's
Yeah.
right. Dave Callen, had the opportunity to record with you recently at Echo, and we got you back. And I think maybe we started talking about this conversation then. I'm not sure, but it's a pleasure to have you back. Thanks for joining us again. If you could just introduce yourself and what your drink of the day is.
Yeah, Dave Callen, owner of SR3, flight instructor and retired Las Vegas Metro Police Air Support Sergeant. And living in Georgia, there's a brewery local here that's awesome called Line Creek. And they make the best IPA, if you're into IPAs, that I've ever had. It's called First Crush. And I'm actually not drinking that because I went to grab one and I realized I drank them all. So
You
Fresh run too many.
So
It's
I
that
dug,
good.
I got a Voodoo Ranger. This is a hazy. It's which one is this? The Juice Force IPA.
Right on.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
had it before. It is pretty good.
Not bad.
Rob Munday. Again, you're a vet for the Hangar Z podcast. A lot of people know who Rob Munday is. Clay Lacey refers to you as the best hoist operator in the world. I think I bring it up.
That's a dangerous comment.
Oh, wow.
I'll second that.
But I laugh at, coming from Clay Lacey, that's a big, it's a big deal in my book. I love Clay. And so if you could just introduce yourself and let us know what your drink today is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I don't know how you back that up, but yeah, Rob Munday, hoist operator instructor with SR3, hoist operator with a bunch of folks throughout the years in Australia and Canada and the US with SR3 all over the place. So yeah, I had a chance to do a bunch of cool things in a bunch of cool places, and yeah, very, very lucky now to be able to teach some of that stuff and show other folks some of the little bits and pieces that I've learned along the way. So yeah, happy to be here with you as well, John. This is obviously the highlight right here. This is the pinnacle.
Yeah, this is fun.
Of anyone's career is a seat on the Hangar Z podcast. So, an interesting beer of the day today. I thought you guys might enjoy this, but you guys are familiar, obviously, a lot of local breweries, Georgia, San Diego, wherever you are, they have their San Diego Brewing Co., their Atlanta Brewing Co. They always seem to have a brewery that's named after a location or the town that it's in, and where I'm at right now, out in the very far east reaches of Canada, in a province called Newfoundland. We have a town, and I'll let the can initially do the talking for you.
Oh, wow.
But it's from the town of Dildo. It's a real place.
Wow.
And they make some actually fantastic beer. And this is from this is a lager. This is a lager from the Dildo Brewing Co. It's a 5% beer, and it's actually really good, believe it or not. So
Wow.
I always want to bring something tasty to the crew, so that's what we're bringing to you guys today. You're
We
welcome.
managed to keep it a family show for about 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So that was good.
Yep.
Yeah,
Hey,
never thought-
the can
never
says it,
thought-
man.
Never thought Dildo was going to make the show.
Well, Rob, you recently stepped in as an honorary host to the Hangar Z podcast, and I'm going to kind of lean on you quite a bit. So you had a lot to do with the establishment of this conversation, coming up with a lot of the talking points. So I'll lean on you quite a bit for that. And I did realize I was so excited about the beer that we're drinking that I totally skipped over Tony and Mike's introduction of where they work and where they come from. So Tony, let's go back to you and just give a little introduction of where you work and what you do there.
I'm sorry, guys. I got so excited about my beer. I left that off. So most of you know me. Some of the viewers may not. Tony Weber. I've been working with San Diego Sheriff's Aviation Division for, 42 years. And out of that 42 years, I've been flying 32. I know you guys are going to make some jokes. One of the flight instructors at the aviation unit for San Diego Sheriff, I teach fast rope, hoist rescue, aerial firefighting, long line, a little bit of everything. So I'm a jack of all trades. And again, happy to be here on this panel. It's going to be a good night.
Yeah. So you've got just a little bit of experience. All jokes aside, it's always a pleasure to sit with you. You do have a wealth of experience and a lot of knowledge to impart on people. So I it's an honor to have you here and to co-host this thing.
I appreciate that.
Mike, if you could just introduce yourself, and we'll skip the electrolyte drink.
Yeah. So Mike Calhoun. I've been with Riverside County Sheriff for 23 years, and in the air unit for about 17 now. Primarily full-time search and rescue pilot on the SAR side of the house. And started off as a TFO like everybody, and flew patrol. We've had A-stars for about 24 years, and went to the H-145 in 2020 and been flying that full-time ever since.
So you and Dave and Tony, the three of you are CFIs. I think that's important to bring up. You guys have the background and knowledge of what that pilot training looks like, and why what we're going to talk about is so important. So if we could, I think we should just start off. Rob, can you talk about kind of the mindset and the idea that this conversation stems from?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me say to you before we continue, Mike Calhoun, published author. Also, fantastic book.
Oh, yeah.
Let's put that out there. You go read Mike's book. Thanks, brother. I think you're welcome. Yeah, I think everyone here is going to have their own experience, I think, and a lot of you guys from sort of the same rough geographical area, but certainly different experiences at different agencies and different states and things like that. And I think everyone who's listening will probably see something similar or can relate to this same experience wherever they're from, whether it be other places in the world, other countries, or other parts of the US or North America in general. But we think, and one of the things that we notice when we get to go out there, and we are fortunate to be able to do so, is to get out to agencies and spend time with them and learn a little bit about their programs, whether we're getting paid or not. My wife hates it, but everywhere I go, I seem to find myself at a base and checking out an aircraft and talking to the crew. And you learn a lot about all these different agencies. And one of the quite common themes, more than probably you would think, is that, folks get training, and whether that be an in-house kind of training program that's built from the ground up, and I think Mike calls it tribal knowledge, right? But it's stuff that, and it's valuable stuff, but it's stuff that an agency has developed over time, and they've built these programs for whatever specific mission set they have, whether it be an aerial use of force or hoisting or whatever it is that they're doing. And some of that is built for that agency in their specific area and their specific aircraft, and it is tailored to their needs, for sure. But there's also, things like factory training and things like that, where these agencies have got some training, but it may not necessarily be taking advantage of all the resources that are available to them to make that program be as good as it possibly can be. And we've seen over the last, I would say, 15 years or so, a proliferation of organizations, and we'll talk about all of them tonight, or a lot of them anyway, that have started to focus more on really kind of specialized, advanced, mission-specific training that really doesn't maybe get captured as well as it could do by an in-house program, or by a factory training program, or by some more generic kind of baseline training programs. And I think some people either don't know they exist at all, don't know they exist at the level they exist at, or maybe just aren't totally familiar or aren't presented with the information required to make informed decisions, I think is the issue. So I think, like you just mentioned, we have 4 pilots sitting with me. I'm just going to be the special comment guy in the back today. But like you say, I have a a fairly unique experience, because quite honestly, when we go flying for operational usage or for training, and I'm in the back, I am at the mercy of you guys, and your ability to do the job or not do the job, or to do it to whatever level you can, has a pretty big impact on me and my well-being in the back. And sometimes I don't have a lot of control over that. So making sure that you guys in the front are leading the charge with the best possible experience you possibly can, I think sets is a selfish attitude, but it kind of sets me up for success in the back. So I'd like to see you guys getting everything you possibly can to make my life easier. And if I can be that guy shouting that from the mountaintop, then I'm happy to be that guy for sure.
Yeah, I think that's important. And my goal in our discussion tonight is not only to expand on the importance of what we're talking about, this mission specific training, but it's also to give folks some tools they might need to go to their administration and be like, hey, we want this training. We know it's expensive. But this is why we think we need it. And Rob, you just kind of hit on that with your experience. Our job is to put you in a position to do what your specific mission is. If we can't do that effectively and efficiently, then we're not serving the people we're protecting properly, in my opinion. So a lot of tonight, I'll lean on you guys to talk about some of the ways you found to get approvals, to work the chain of command, to explain why it's so important to get this training. And it's neat that everyone kind of comes from a different agency and a different background to kind of talk about the things that did work for them and didn't work for them. So I just want to briefly touch on factory training. I think about all the helicopters that are being produced now. You've had an explosion of agencies picking up new mission sets because the aircraft are so capable that are being produced right now. Law enforcement aviation is no longer just respond to the call for service on the ground. We've got all these specialized mission sets that we're going to talk about tonight: airborne use of force, fast rope, hoist training, all the different things, horse rescue training, which is interesting for Riverside County. So we've picked all these mission sets up, but I think we're slowly trying to catch up to the training that's required. I think the tribal knowledge is great, but I think we need to leverage the knowledge set that exists in our industry to make everything more efficient, more effective, and most importantly, most safe. So I do want to just touch on factory training. All the OEMs do an amazing job at the factory in the training they provide. I think that's step one. Step two is reaching out to try and find somebody who can offer this mission specific training. So I want to, Dave, go to you for a second and talk about what you've seen as a CFI, and specifically as a CFI with SR3. You've had a unique opportunity to interact with a lot of agencies. Talk about the benefit of having a company with training that has a CFI as part of that training component. Can you talk about that a little bit? Thanks to our sponsor, AEM, the revolutionary MTP 136D panel mount Forest Service radio has received full approval by the United States Forest Service and Department of Interior for use by all federally regulated aerial firefighting agencies and contractor aircraft. Ready for an upgrade? Visit aem-corp.com/radio.
We offer a CFI on every class. Obviously, if it's a helicopter aviation class, we do. And we found tremendous success for several reasons. For one, I think, as Rob said, the pilots are kind of the most neglected position in any of these specific mission sets, quite honestly. And to piggyback on what you said about the OEMs, they do phenomenal work with training you, both initial and recurrent training in their aircraft types. I mean, who could do that better? But there isn't really a lot of options out there for mission specific training. So, and it's not really their fault. I mean, that's not really what they're geared for, right? I mean, they make the aircraft, they teach you how to fly it and do that safely. But, then when you get into mission specific training by some of the other options out there, we just realized when we started our company that there was a gap there, as Rob says. And the pilots, whether it's hoisting, fast roping, short haul, aerial firefighting, aerial use of force, all those classes, we've taught all of those. And the pilots always tell us, man, that was outstanding. There was just so many things that we learned that we didn't realize, particularly with initial training. And we've seen not only does the learning curve go way up because there's just so many technical aspects of it that people don't realize. And I think that the assumption is just that, hey, if there's a helicopter pilot and they have 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours, whatever, they can fly the helicopter and they can do what they need to do with it to get the job done. And there's a lot more to it than that. So we're able to take all of, that experience and just take it to a very technical level and explain, how to apply that with their aircraft. And then a lot of times specifically to a specific aircraft platform. We try to provide folks that have a lot of experience in the specific aircraft that they're flying, which is a whole nother level. But we see a whole lot of increase in their ability to learn. And then it really helps take the burden off of some of the other folks in the class. Like, as an example, if Rob is teaching a hoist operator in the back in the hoist class, he's got a lot of experience and he can a lot of times maybe give some suggestions or advice to the pilot to maybe help them out. But he's not a pilot, and there's a lot of technical parts that he just really wouldn't know what to say or, how to put that out there. And then quite honestly, unfortunately, it may not be as well received because he's not a pilot if they're doing the job. So, we've just found huge success and an exponential growth in the quality of the training because of it. And then the second aspect of that is the safety. It just adds a whole additional level of safety to any of these training types. Because, if there's any type of drift or movement or, any type of an approach that's not working, a lot of times when folks are really loaded up, you guys, you've all been there, especially in training, if you don't have somebody there that's able to just kind of watch, monitor, maybe fix something immediately before it turns into a big problem, whether it's just, a swing or something like that. That's what we do. And that's, basically our job 24/7. So we're able to stay ahead of it and then not only give good training, but keep it a lot safer. And, then the folks in the back and on the ground don't have to worry about the pilot. They're getting their own training. So it really is like a total package. And, in my opinion, it's really the only way to do it. I know it's possible to do it without it, but it's just so much better with it.
Yeah. Mike, you guys recently had SR3 come out to your agency and provide some training. Can you talk about some of what Dave was saying as far as the ability of SR3 to bring in a CFI to train the pilot to that specific skill set versus yourself as the CFI at the agency trying to teach that yourself and some of the benefits that might come from having an SR3 type company come out with that CFI?
Yeah, it blows me away to train the hoist operator and the rescue specialist and completely ignore the pilot. If the pilot cannot hold a reference point and keep you where you need to be, then it's the hoist operator is going to have a hard time all day long. The instructor in the back is going to have a hard time because, if you're not, picking up plumb center, there's going to be swings induced. And so it has to really start with a stable platform and to hoist from, as stable as can be. And that starts with the pilot. About in 2020, we took delivery of our 145 and I'm probably one of the test cases for this whole, or the purpose for a podcast like this, because we took the aircraft. This was a lot of aircraft to go to from a 125. And but at the time I was the chief pilot and I didn't really know of the resources out there, especially SR3 and offering the CFI component to the training as well. So we had been hoisting for 20 years and we just took it as a very slow progression, a lot of static work on the ground. And we did a lot of things internally, and I wrote up about a 50-hour syllabus per pilot. And so we took on a lot because we were going IFR as well. So that was a whole other animal to slowly take on and to do it right and do it safely. So we just kind of did it in-house. We saw the differences that there would be, like especially in the doorway, their choreography there, especially with a new hoist that can boom in and boom out, as opposed to an A-star with a fixed hoist. So there was a lot of things to know. And had I known that there was a company out there that not only did this, but has an instructor that had 145 time already, then that could have made things so much easier, so much more streamlined for us. There was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of, you like in the factory training, you get, the factory training is necessary and it's good. but they're there to keep you out of trouble in the aircraft. Before they release that aircraft to you can start. They want to show you the basic maneuvers, the basic functionalities of the autopilots and so forth. So just to keep you out of trouble, so you can kind of start to learn on your own. And so that's kind of like, you first start flying a helicopter, you shouldn't probably start doing rescue operations. It's kind of like, you get your driver's license. Okay, well, you want to be a race car driver. Well, you probably need some time on the road driving a regular car, and then you would go to like a race car school, right? Like SR3 is for us. So
I'm just thinking about that, when they have the driving school with the dual controls where there's 2 steering wheels.
Yeah.
Like imagine taking your 16-year-old daughter out and not having dual controls the first time she's ever driven a car before. Like that is terrifying. It should be terrifying if it's not,
Later on, we found out about SR3. I saw them through social media, and man, I'm thinking this is exactly what we should have. So last year, I think it was, we invited them to come out and basically do like a hoist audit, like a program audit. I wanted them to come in and just take a look at what we're doing and see where we can clean it up, especially from a pilot that has some 145 experience already. I think they were the first law enforcement agency to get the D2 145s, and we were only like the third at the time. So so it was such a great experience to get that knowledge and training daytime and nighttime. And then they also did our initial over water stuff. So that was a whole new mission profile for us because we didn't do anything over water or any swift water or anything like that. So that was good to have that come in. That was a whole new thing for us. And that one was kind of like, we're not going to try to teach ourselves how to do that one because we've never done that. At least like initially with hoisting, it's fairly similar. Let's learn the aircraft and get up in the mountains a lot and get a feel, let the pilots get a really good amount of time feeling the aircraft in the mountains. And then before we start opening doors and deploying rescuers. So very slow process there. But, when they came in, it was great. It was, they knew the aircraft. They had a lot of experienced guys like Rob and Dave come in. And it was very helpful, eye-opening. It was a bit of a sell though, because my command staff was kind of like, why do you need this training if you've already been doing it? So I had to explain that, and maybe it's good for other organizations as well, that it's not a bad idea to just invite some experts in and see what you're doing to make sure, because we can all learn, we can all get better, we can do things better, more efficiently and safely. And so it was a little bit of a tough sell, but in the end, they agreed that yes, let's have them come in. And I think, frankly, one of the things that made it appealing, at least to my command staff, is that I know SR3, these guys, they're not like exorbitantly expensive. And so that made it very attractive. It was a very good deal. I'll just say a very good deal. So for what you're getting, it's amazing. So
I think that's one of the things too, Mike, is I don't think people realize, but like when you compare, and I know how much factory training costs from all of the OEMs, I am pretty much on the money in terms of where that sits. And if anyone who's listening who thinks that, it's not just SR3, and I don't want this to turn into some kind of big SR3 fest. Like there are lots of training companies out there that do a lot of different training for a lot of these different special missions. And quite honestly, there's going to be some fluctuation in price between all of us, no doubt about it. But I think I can pretty safely say that every single one of us is way cheaper than you think in terms of like when compared to factory training. Like when you see what it costs for Airbus or Bell and it's nothing against the guys. Again, they have some high-tech stuff. They have some really good people. It costs money for sure. But because we're flying your aircraft on your location and using your facilities, and there is some cost savings there. And I don't think people realize like it's not that expensive for the amount of people that are being trained to a very, very high level. If anyone's thinking for a second that cost is a concern and hasn't explored this option in much depth because of that, I would say put that out of your mind now and at least ask the questions first.
Mike, can you talk about going back on approvals? I know every agency is different and the way that they get things approved is different, but for you guys, what was effective and efficient for you in getting this training approved?
It was an easier sell tacking on the overwater part as the new component of the mission profile. And so I wanted a couple extra days to do some daytime, nighttime kind of hoist auditing. And so because it had a new mission profile component to it, I think that was an easier sell. But, you know, one of the other things that came up too is like, look, if we're going to be a professional or continue to be a professional rescue organization that's public use, backed with, we have a sheriff that is extremely supportive of our mission in air support. He's the one who personally, he got us the 145. He asked what we needed. He got it for us. And he has, I kind of used the quote that he gave out one time in a public speaking forum, that he said, I do not ever want to have the wrong piece of equipment to safely rescue somebody within my county. And so with that kind of overall kind of commander's intent, it's kind of an easier sell. Like, hey, we need this. We need to do this. We've always had to turn down swift water rescues, overwater rescues, because we didn't have the appropriate aircraft or the training to do it. So that made it an easier sell. And then subsequent training later with SR3 became like the Lazard training. It's an extremely technical operation to rescue a rock climber off of a sheer face. And we have some really, really good rock climbing areas in our county, and we've actually put it into use. But, you know, utilizing something like that and getting that training, it takes a slow progression and a very methodical and with intent and purpose to slowly start that training and get better at it over time. But and then we just had him here recently a few weeks ago again for the Swiftwater training, and so that went great. That was a lot going on there too, a whole new mission set for the pilot and for the hoist operators. I mean, that's probably the one you really work in concert the most with your hoist operator and pilot, is that very fluid.
There's a lot going on, hey? It's busy.
It's a very dynamic, ever-changing situation, and you have to be a good crew that can adapt and change and meet those changes that your hoist operator's calling out. And it's hopefully it should be simple as, hey, if we're going to do this rescue operation, then let's do it right. You know, we got this expensive helicopter, and there's some other things that come with it that we need to that needs to come along with it. It's just the kind of the cost of doing business. It's the industry standard. One thing I wish we would have done better is having the knowledge of what we were going to need eventually down the road to complete these different mission profiles, like the water stuff and all of the different gear and equipment and training that we were going to need. I wish that we had, like a consultant that would come in and say, okay, on the very beginning, before we even took delivery of the aircraft, what are we going to have to build into the budget here? Okay, all the rescue baskets and these strops and this training and a Lazard device and all that stuff. I wish we would have known, because we've had to kind of go back to our command in the subsequent last couple of years and kind of nickel and dime dad. And it gets a little frustrating for him. Like, you want more money. And so we're like, yeah, well, and then it's like, why didn't you foresee this? And we're like, well, hey, we didn't know what we didn't know, but this is what we need now. So yeah, if we would have had that in the very beginning, like in the build out phase of the aircraft, and we could have built that into the budget and planned better.
It's funny. I feel like when the idea of the budget for the aircraft comes up, you just go into the SR3 saying you don't know what you don't know. You have an idea of what you want to do, but don't really have an idea of how to get from point A to point B, at least in the beginning phase. Is that something that SR3 provides as a service?
Yeah, Rob, you could probably speak on that.
Yeah, I can for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we'll kind of my kind of, I guess my plan was to wrap up at the end with a bit of a sort of a summary or a call to action. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think, basically, unfortunately, the where SR3 sits in the hierarchy of things is actually pretty low, to be fair. Like when San Diego sheriffs or Las Vegas Metro Police want to go out and buy a new aircraft, they go to an OEM who probably directs them to a completions company like a Davenport or a Hangar One or a Metro or someone like that. And then, they then go down the line to some of these little little specialty kind of outfits to just do the last finishing touches. Maybe there's some factory training built in there. And then sometime, many months to years after the sale is finalized and the budget's completed, we get wind through the grapevine that basically this aircraft has been purchased, and by then it's too late, right? So yeah, like to be able to get connected with the OEMs and the completions teams, like the big players like I just mentioned, and plenty more, earlier on, and get involved in the conversation. We would do that for free. Like it wouldn't even be for money at that point. We would just love the opportunity to have a conversation with those people. Say again?
I said Dave's eye is twitching.
No, I know. That's okay. I'll pay for it on the back end. Don't worry. And I'm sure anyone in our position would say the same thing. Like, and it's not about money. It's never been about money. And again, it sounds like a freaking... It sounds, it sounds cliched, but it's not. It's about making sure that people have the right tools to do the job safely and effectively. And we see it time and time again that folks are out there doing the job, wishing in hindsight, they had have known more. And we would happily, if you ever are about to buy a new aircraft, get a new division of your agency or get a new skill set, just pick up the phone and call us. We're not going to charge you, but we would just love to be able to say, hey, this is what you need to consider. This is what you need to think about. Have you thought about this? Have you put any, time into this? Because it's going to pay dividends later. And yes, there's an opportunity on the back end, for anyone who's doing training or anything like that, or gear sales or anything, to maybe make a couple of bucks. But that's certainly not the intent here at all. But to be able to have that opportunity earlier in the pipeline would be massive for sure.
Talking pretty heavily about the specific mission training, and I did kind of breeze over the factory training and kind of what it offers you. I think from my perspective, I had a chance to go to Airbus and go to the 125 school, and it was great. They go through all the systems, and that systems knowledge is critically important for you to understand the aircraft and then how to understand emergency procedures and all the things that come from that. That's the base of what you need as knowledge as a pilot. So, Tony, I'd like to defer to you for a second. Can you talk about kind of your thoughts on the importance of OEM training, and then, how the training afterwards kind of builds on that? Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Sure. So at one point at San Diego Sheriff, we were getting EPs from the OEM in a MD 500. We were getting EPs in a 407, and we were getting EPs in a Bell 205. And when you think about what they're training you to do, and we were lucky, they came to us. All the training came to San Diego, and we did it in-house in our own aircraft. But to be solid in emergency procedures in 3 different airframes, that's asking a lot. So we got the training twice a year. You have to obviously have a very robust budget to cover that kind of stuff. But if you think about it, one day you could be flying, that 530F and the engine quits. That auto rotation is a lot different than when the engine quits in a Bell 205. They're 2 different animals. And so what I tell people is, the OEMs get you very solid, and when things go really bad in that aircraft, you can get it on the ground safely. That's who you should be going to for that type of stuff. And so, when you start comparing OEM training, whether it be Airbus or Bell, whoever, and then you compare that to mission-specific training, it could be hoist, it could be aerial firefighting, it could be fast rope, long line. It truly is two different animals. I mean, the OEMs are not there to train you to do that mission specific stuff. They're there to train you to fly that aircraft efficiently and safely and have all your emergency procedures down. And again, they do it very well. I cannot say anything bad about MD or Bell. I haven't flown with Airbus, but I've heard really good things about them. It's just two different training things that are going on here. And you just need to be able to do both and know who to look for to get the information you need. I've gotten so many calls over the years from an agency that'll go, hey, you guys do hoist rescue and aerial firefighting. We want to get into that too. And the first question I will ask them is, are you going to get 100% backing from your department with a budget? And if the answer is no, I highly advise them, do not get involved in this if they're not going to back you on equipment and training, because number one, it's not safe, and it's going to be very frustrating for you to try and pull that off on your own.
Can you talk about some of the tools that you've used for justification, or that you've seen used for justification on those types of trainings, and how to get that approved by your command staff?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing we do is we are blessed to have a full-time safety officer. And sometimes the stuff that we drop in that safety officer's lap, sometimes he looks at us and goes, man, I don't know if they're paying me enough for this, but we always go the safety route first. So if we're going to be doing something new, back in the day, we got our Bell 205 mediums in 2005, and we were smart enough to know we know nothing about hoist rescue. So we went to our command, asked, hey, we need professional training, and we went out and got it. The budget was there. Again, we're very blessed to have a very good budget. Brought an outside vendor in, and when we went through the hoist training, you talk about not knowing what you don't know. I mean, we were brand new. There were a few suggestions here and there in the house. Hey, this doesn't look that hard. We could do that ourselves. That would have been a huge mistake, because once you have a class by a professional that knows exactly what they're doing, at the end of that class, you're sitting there going, I didn't know 3/4 of what they taught us, because you just don't know. And I think a lot of units out there are guilty of that. They try and train in-house by somebody that used to do it in the military, but I think you might be shortchanging your unit. You should go out and get professional training. Hopefully you have a budget to support that, and that is the safest thing to do.
I don't think, and I'm sure Dave would agree with me, in terms of the factory training, like to Tony's point, you've got Bell, Sikorsky, Airbus, MD, you name it, right? And if anybody knows how to deliver training on a product that you design from the ground up, it better be the OEM. Like, if SR3 could deliver a better factory training course than the OEM themselves, there's a big problem there. Like, we can deliver a great factory course, but I would be very surprised. We shouldn't be able to. It's not to say we couldn't. We shouldn't be able to deliver a better class than them, because they built the damn thing. Like, if anyone knows that product inside out, it should be them. And I'll say categorically, point blank, I've spoken to every single OEM about these advanced mission profiles, whether it be fire or hoist or whatever. Every single one of them, you barely get the sentence out of your mouth, and they are like, cool, we ain't touching it. Like, we don't want any. They acknowledge, we both acknowledge, we acknowledge, they acknowledge, we both acknowledge consistently that that's not our piece. Like, that's not where we sit here. We can do it, sure, but do we want to? Are we the best person to deliver it? Probably not, right? And they're the first ones to acknowledge that they just don't have that capability in-house to do that. And yeah, it's worth mentioning that I don't think anyone's trying to, pull any punches there. That's a reality that's acknowledged on both sides.
Yeah. Dave, at Las Vegas Metro, you guys were early adopters in the 145. Can you talk about how you guys took delivery of the 145, how you made your way into training with that, and then also talk about some of the justification practices that you've seen that have been effective for folks that might look for this kind of training?
Yeah, we had a very similar operation to Tony, actually. I mean, for several years we were flying two Hueys, flying a 407 and a bunch of F model 500s. And as Tony said, I mean, I was doing factory training in the Hueys with Bell, and then with MD, and then eventually with Airbus. You know, we would go to Western. I've trained at Helicopter Institute with copter safety with all these different people. And as far as how our program looked, you know, we had been doing hoist rescue for several years with those Hueys. And then we get the H-145, and Airbus delivered, honestly, the most outstanding initial training I've ever received in a helicopter for that 145. 2 weeks of ground school. I mean, every bit of 80 hours of ground school, and then a solid week of flying the aircraft. They came to us. We did the whole thing in-house at our location, which was amazing. And, you know, at the end of that, I felt very comfortable in the aircraft, especially as I built more time after they left. As far as the transition training, we realized it was very different. There were so many things different about it. The aircraft, quite honestly, performed much better, which was amazing. You know, it was super technically advanced, had all these autopilot upper modes and all these things that it did. And we didn't get any specific training from Airbus on how to apply those to the special missions, and was able to kind of over time figure out how to do that. You know, if we knew the autopilot does this, we knew the helicopter does that, or how do we then apply that to these different, you know, things that we're trying to do out there on these rescues. But as far as, you know, bringing somebody in, it was a tough sell. It honestly was. I mean, we had a handful of folks in my agency that were just like, hey man, hoisting, you guys are great pilots. You just spent all this money on this factory training. And, you know, it was said earlier, it's expensive, but it has to be. You know, the OEMs are charging what they're charging, but I mean, it has to be. You look at what you're doing. And I always say, you know, like you're paying for someone's experience, whether it's the OEM, whether it's SR3, whether it's one of the other training companies that do rescue training. You know, you're paying for the experience of these individuals that are coming out and giving it to you, which, you know, I mean, it took years to acquire that. All the mistakes that were made, all of the things that we know are supposed to be done a certain way. So when we were looking at trying to get transition training in the 145, we realized, you know, like Tony said, we don't know how to rig the cabin in this thing properly. You know, there's so many nuances to it. The rotor wash, it had a smaller footprint, and it was honestly more savage than the Huey. It was impressive. Yeah. I mean, there were so many little things. And then honestly, you know, when you talk about having, if you blend that with having somebody come in to take a look at your organization every so many years, we hadn't had anybody come in quite some time. So it was an opportunity to do both. And what I had always said, and I've said this lots of times on the road and at conferences and stuff, but you know, the absence of an accident does not imply the presence of safety. Just because you haven't had an accident in 20, 30 years, it doesn't mean you're necessarily a safe operation. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing things the right way or the most up-to-date way. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that maybe you've just gotten lucky. So we kind of took that stance with, unfortunately, with, you know, the fatal accident that we had at my agency in 2013 and said, you know, the stakes are high here. And that was one of the big things that I leveraged was, listen, you know, we can't get this wrong. We can't afford to get this wrong. We were doing what we thought was everything right previously, and we lost a guy. And, you know, if you look at that coupled with, you know, again, we had a great operational record before and after that. There was really no specific person's fault, but you know, eventually with enough kind of discussions about it and a lot of input, everybody felt the same way. And then eventually the resistance to walls kind of came down. But even then, you know, you talk about the money part of it. Some agencies are hugely well-funded and supported financially, and others, I mean, like in Vegas, I love Metro, but, you know, it was a bit of a fight, quite honestly, to get the funds, because going back to what Rob said is that was never budgeted for. So now you're asking for a big chunk of money that nobody ever planned on spending, and you got to fight for it. So we had to take that fight all the way up to the top, and it was a bit of an uphill battle. But eventually, you know, they did understand why we needed it. They gave it to us, and it actually kind of rebooted our hoist program, and it was so much better and safer than it already was once we ran through it, and with a much more capable aircraft. So yeah, it was a bit of an uphill battle, but you know, I think that's pretty standard in a lot of places. And You know, like it was said earlier, if that was able to be considered before with the purchase of the aircraft, then there wouldn't be so much sting to it. You know, when you're asking for maybe some new gear and some training and stuff.
Yep.
If it's just a single line item on, you know, a purchase of an aircraft that's over, you know, 10, 12 million, $14 million, it's not that bad. But when all that money has been spent and the dust settles, and then you're like, oh, hey, and by the way, we'd also like another chunk of money, you know, for this mission training. And sometimes they're like, well, I mean, where are we supposed to get that? And,
right.
They found it. But at the end of the day, that was kind of how it went down for us.
I like the idea of utilizing your safety program to kind of, you know, push that forward. I think that's huge. It sounds like that's what all of you guys did at the end of the day, is utilize the safety program, talk about the safety of the crews, the safety for the folks that we're protecting, to get that approved and push forward. You brought up something, Dave, that I think is really important to talk about. We talk about technology and all the benefits that it gives us as pilots, as air crews. It's solved a lot of problems, you know, but understanding the capabilities of that equipment is huge. Autopilot systems, for example, like they're so complex. Mick Minks talks about something, and it pertains to the mission equipment. We use it sometimes like it's a fax machine when it has the capability of being an iPhone. You know, we're scratching the surface on the knowledge set that we have surrounding the abilities and capabilities of these programs. I know you, Dave, have very intimate knowledge of the autopilot systems in the 145. And I remember talking to Mike and hearing him talk about how you kind of changed their philosophy and mindset on how they're utilizing that autopilot system. So Mike, can you talk about your experience with that and kind of give your insight on that?
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Autopilots are great, and there's a functionality in the 145 that's really great. It's kind of like an auto hover, just for a common vernacular. And so it's a button you push twice, and it'll hold your position based on a GPS signal. And so it gives you a really stable hover, but it's still a component that's in a data cycle of the air management computers, the AMCs, and so there's like a data cycle it has to take in, especially if you're holding like the altitude off the barometric pressure, and you can become over reliant on it and just kind of overutilize it. And what that can do then is can erode your hand flying skills. And in our agency, we still have to hoist with the 125s, and like almost all of September and the first part of October, our 145 was down for scheduled 800-hour maintenance, and so we were back to hand flying in the A-stars, and we had to. You have to do that. You have to maintain that proficiency and safety, because it's a very 125 is a smaller aircraft. It's not. It does have no SAS, no stability augmentation, nothing like that. No autopilot for sure. So you can sit there like Dave was telling us, like you could sit there and push the button and just kind of monitor, but it is still changing. You still have to fly the aircraft. It is still it's moving, and you have to, the book says you have to mind the controls still. You have to be hands-on, and because it will kind of sometimes do its own thing, and you have to correct it. So I like to just maintain those hand flying skills as well. It's challenging. It's better. There was a time when the guys were out training us, and we were doing the Lazard training, and the 145 was dedicated to that. And we had a rescue of a girl drove her car off the side of the road, off the cliff, and we had to conduct the rescue in an A-star in a 125. And so, and that was me. And I had to go right from a 145 into an A-star. And I'm like, okay, I feel pretty good because I've done this recently, and we have to stay very proficient with both airframes. So, yeah, you can, you look at a lot of these NTSB reports, and Autopilots kill people sometimes. And it's the not knowing the utilization or the proper procedures or the appropriate time to use or not use an autopilot. It can kill people. Not knowing your autopilot, why, that whole, why did it do that? Because you told it to. Why is it not doing this? Oh, because you didn't tell it to, and you're expecting it to do something else. So autopilots are something that you have to be very, very proficient with, very knowledgeable. You have to actually use them, especially, we still do this too. We'll go out and do our practice IFR approaches and whatnot, and we're getting vectored, or we're trying to capture an ILS or the localizer, and you push a button what you think is going to do, and it does something different, and it starts going a completely different direction. And it's, why is it doing that? Well, because you told it to. So an autopilot is something that it commands respect, and it commands a level of proficiency that you have to put the time in to utilize it and master it. Or otherwise, you can piss off ATC or get a deviation, or worse, if you don't really know what you're doing, then you can get hurt or at least bend some metal.
I think in the special mission side of things too, like, and then you guys that have been to factory training will correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel pretty confident in saying the way that you guys as pilots are trying to take advantage of these complex systems that are built into these aircraft now, almost are counterintuitive or counterproductive, or go against the intent of some of those systems, the way that the OEMs designed them to be used. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're asking these systems to do something that is potentially, not outside necessarily of the scope, but if you're going to take them into these deep, dark corners of their capabilities, you can much more quickly be bitten by those capabilities if you're not using them correctly. Like taking off out of an airport and flying straight and level and directing it via nav to, airport B, that's one thing. But asking it to hover in a canyon, at night is a very, very different thing. And I think with great power comes great responsibility, right? And knowing how to utilize those systems for good or evil can go much more sideways in both. If you utilize them well, I think Dave might have some points on this too, but if you utilize them well, they can be amazingly effective. But if you utilize them badly, the consequences are also much more severe in those environments. So I think it's much more important for sure.
Yeah, Dave, I want to defer to you on this because you've got a lot of experience seeing everything from, no autopilot to autopilot and where it's being utilized. So can you kind of give us your input on what you're seeing?
Like I said, we never had anything with any type of autopilot. I mean, nothing. None of the aircraft that I flew had an autopilot prior to the H-145. And then it went from, basically no technology to pretty much some of the most advanced technology available in the civilian market, that you could have in a helicopter. So yeah, the transition was pretty interesting at first. And I mean, I give you the example from when the first flight that I did in the 145 with the instructor from Airbus, we took off from the airport and we're flying west just to do the first, hour familiarization. And, he says, okay, hey, hit this button and just let go of the controls. And I'm like, okay, hit the button. And I said, just let go. And he's like, yeah, man, just let go of the controls. And I said, oh, all right. So I let go. And, I'm sitting there like this, I'm like guarding the controls. And he's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I mean, I'm just like guarding the controls, I guess. And he's like,
I have control issues. I can't let go.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I've never flown anything that'll do that before. And he's like, dude, just relax. And so finally he's like, dude, put your hands in your lap, put your feet on the floor and just let it fly. And I did. And I sat there and I'm like, oh, this is a little uncomfortable for me, man. I don't know about this, but I quickly realized that it does a phenomenal job. I mean, I was blown away at how well it actually worked. But as Mike said, I mean, it'll do exactly what you tell it to do. And it's not perfect. Any autopilot. Now, I've had a chance to fly in a lot of, different aircraft. I was just in the 412 EPX earlier this week, and same thing, phenomenal autopilot. But, they're not perfect. They can honestly, they're not supposed to. They can exceed a limitation in flight. There's a lot of things that, it just sometimes will struggle with. Like Rob said, If you put any of these helicopters in a canyon and they're trying to utilize GPS or maybe, some of the internal accelerometers in the helicopter and the wind's whipping and, the GPS signal isn't great, it's going to struggle a little bit. You kind of have to expect that. So as long as you work within its limitations, it will be a huge workload reducer for you, which is what it should be. And when I came out and flew with Mike and his guys the first time, and we were doing some of the night stuff, I told all the guys I flew with, I said, you guys are going to hate me because I'm going to tell you, you're not using that autopilot. We're not using it, man. We're like doing this old school. Because my thing is, you hand fly a lot as much as you can, and then you use the autopilot when you need it. So if you need it over water, if you need it at night when you don't have a good reference point, that's when I would use the autopilot. And I've used it with great success. But I've always still locked in a reference point. I've always had a hands-on, with the controls that's required. And I've watched it and I've, seen if there's any drift, I just fix it immediately. But I've done a couple of hoists at night where, the wind's whipping. You can only face one direction to get it done. And there's really not a whole lot to look at. So you're looking through goggles at something far away and the hoist operator's keeping you honest over a spot on the ground. And, were it not for an autopilot, wouldn't have been able to do the hoist there. Would have had to put guys in and have them hike, and it would have been hours to get the job done. So yeah, they're phenomenal. And getting back to the kind of the bridging the gap between the OEMs and the special mission training, when we came out and worked with Mike and his guys to do that open water training, they had been using the 145's autopilot for, hovering point in space. But a lot of the guys went through factory training and there was all these things that it would do, and they never had a reason to apply it to something specific like flying to a target over water. So that was one of the things we were able to bring to that class to say, hey, listen, it's got this hover mode, but there's kind of like a middle mode called GTC, which is like ground trajectory control. And what you can do over something like water is like, hey, let me show you this. You can set a height above the ground with your radar altimeter, and you can fly forward at a certain ground speed, engage that mode, and it holds a track across the ground at a specific speed, and it doesn't deviate. So you talk about like a workload reducer, and you can make little increments of your track across the ground when you're trying to fly to a person that's in the water. And literally when you get over the top of them, you can then transition and engage to that other mode he was talking about called GTCH, and now capture a point in space and hover over your target. And then you can move incrementally in 1 meter increments from there. So, but they were like, oh man, we didn't even realize, we forgot we even had GTC in this thing. We just never use it, but they never had a reason to use it. So it wasn't really their fault, because they're like, well, why would we use GTC? It's not a mode that we use when we're hoisting because we don't need it to stop. But now over water, it makes sense. Like you're trying to fly a track at a speed. So they were like, oh, that's great. We'll actually use this mode now. So, that was another example that we were able to give them some really specific training on that platform that helped them a lot. And it was pretty awesome.
I think one way to put it too is like, the autopilot in any aircraft that I've ever been in, I've been in most of them now, quite honestly. Like, let's just say that there's an arbitrary cap and that autopilot is capable of flying the aircraft at like an 8 out of 10, right? Which is pretty good. Like in 99% of circumstances, an 8 out of 10 is going to save your bacon, especially if the weather's poor or whatever else. But there are lots of times where Mike and Tony and John and Dave can fly that aircraft at a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. And if you can fly the aircraft better than the autopilot can, you should be hand flying it. Now, if you're in some poor location when the weather's terrible and you can only put in a 6 out of 10 effort, maybe that's the time to get some help from the systems that are there to do such great work. But, allowing the autopilot to give you an 8 out of 10 when you're sitting in the front right seat, being capable of giving a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, here's me in the back being like, guys, like, come on, like I need better. Because quite honestly, I can tell the difference. Like when I'm sitting in the back, I know when the aircraft is trying to hold a hover, and I know the second, literally, I'm not joking, I can close my eyes and I can feel it. I know the second when Dave or Mike puts their hands on the controls or Tony puts their hands on the controls and starts flying the aircraft for real, the difference is immediate. And it's not as reactive, it's not as bouncy. Like the end result is going to be largely the same. But from my perspective, where that 1 out of 10 at the very end, that's where I operate all the time, matters. And knowing the difference and knowing when is the correct time to utilize those tools is just so key for what we're doing.
a quick rabbit trail regarding the autopilot subject. So I was lucky enough as a law enforcement pilot to get invited to the Coast Guard Rescue School as an observer. And we're about 3 days into it, and we're at the lighthouse on the cliff. We're in a Dolphin. I'm in a gunner's belt with a strap. I got to go anywhere I wanted in the aircraft. And they're doing cliff ops in a Dolphin. And I'm up in between the pilots looking, hey, this is cool. They have it on autopilot, and they're making very small corrections with a joystick. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm not verbalizing this. You guys are cheating. I'm thinking that to myself. One of them, they both have their feet on the floor, hands, they're doing this, and they look at me and they dubbed me the law dog in the class, and they look back and they go, law dog, how's your auto hover work? And I go, these two hands and these 2 feet. And they looked at me like I was a unicorn, and they go, you do cliff rescues with no, and I said, absolutely. We don't have that luxury. And they thought I was crazy. So
That's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. You can fly it better. I think of the rescue we had up against the cliff, rescuing that injured rock climber above Idlewild. And I had to get about 8 feet from the rock in the main rotor disc, and I was hand flying it. And it was such a long process for the RS to get down there and package up the guy and then get him up on the hook as a 2-up, that I was getting kind of smoked. And so the autopilot was great because once they were on the hook, I was able to offset away from the rock about 10 more feet. And then I hit that GTCH and I took a breath while they're coming up, and it allowed me to reset and just kind of shake my hands and relax the pucker a little bit.
And that's my point, Mike. You were below that 8 out of 10. You couldn't deliver an 8 out of 10 performance at that point. The autopilot had a better capability than you did, so you utilized the tool to help you rather than hinder you. Like, that's the move. You know, there's a time and a place, right? And that's a good time to utilize the tool.
Yeah, when I was up against the rock in the hoist, it was like I want to be hands-on on this.
Absolutely.
I trust the autopilot. It's great, but it can be wonky, and then just hand fly it. And it's a lot of times you can make the corrective input faster than the computers can. And there's a data cycle there, and there's mechanics involved. And so it's just good old fashioned feeling the seat and making the input a lot faster than the computer can. And
I think the conversation surrounding knowing when and where to use certain tools is important, you know, and I'm thankful that we went through that, because the autopilot systems, they're so complex and advanced. You really have to spend a lot of time just understanding the basic functions. And I think then to understand how they apply to the very specific mission sets, then is a whole nother conversation. I think that's where bringing in someone like Dave, who has a unique understanding of all these different mission sets, is a benefit to everybody involved. And I think people listening, like, this seems like a SR3 commercial. And I guess in some ways it is, because I love what you guys do. But as I thought through this conversation, you guys are uniquely positioned to do this. I don't know of any other companies that are training that have the same CFI component. So that's kind of why I brought you guys in for this conversation, just for the folks listening to know this isn't a paid commercial. This is, you know.
John, you know what this is a commercial for? It's a blatant ad to go and find someone that can show you the limits of your systems. I don't care who it is. Go and find someone that can take you out into your operating environment and show you where the limitations are of your mission equipment, because the OEMs cannot and will not do it. Simple as that. Like, they don't want to do it. They admit that they don't want to do it. We comfortably will take you out there and we will show you how to make your autopilot not want to play the game anymore. You know, we can comfortably take you out there, and there are potentially other people out there that can do that too. Go out and do it safely, but go out and learn those things, because that is the gap that we're talking about. That is the difference between the factory training and the mission training, is going out and finding those limits and finding those capabilities. And that's what the ad is for, in my opinion. It can be for whoever wants to show you that.
Now, the reality is most of these missions we're talking about aren't taking place on a sunny day in Southern California at sea level when
No.
there's no variability there. All these things are taking place at high altitude, windy conditions, terrain, weather, all the things that surround that. So the limits are what we're talking about. We're not talking about your standard atmospheric conditions. So I think that is important to bring up. David, looked like you had to touch on before I go to the next question. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Thanks to our sponsor, AEM, the revolutionary MTP-136D panel mount Forest Service radio has received full approval by the United States Forest Service and Department of Interior for use by all federally regulated aerial firefighting agencies and contractor aircraft. Ready for an upgrade? Visit aem-corp.com/radio. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you for joining us for this insightful two-part series on the urgent need for mission-specific training in public safety aviation. We love the conversation we had with Hangar Z alumni guests Dave Callen, Rob Munday, and Mike Calhoun. We hope this discussion has shed light on the need for mission-specific training to hone in the specialized skills required for the mission sets in public safety aviation. We hope it's inspired you to embrace continuous learning and collaboration within your own agencies. The complexity of aerial operations demands not only advanced skills, but also sound decision-making and preparation that comes through advanced training with experts like the SR3 crew. If you found this episode valuable, we encourage you to share it with your colleagues and peers. Together, we can drive the conversation forward and enhance the safety and efficiency of public safety aviation. If you enjoy the Hangar Z podcast and want to support our mission, we invite you to like, subscribe, and write a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also plays a crucial role in promoting the missions in public safety aviation. By subscribing, you'll ensure you never miss an episode filled with valuable insights and discussions. Your likes and reviews help us to reach more listeners, spreading awareness about the critical issues and advancements in our field. Together, we can make a difference and elevate the conversation around public safety aviation. Thank you for your support. Cheers.